Hello, friends. So I may be out today, but that does not mean that you are going to get away with not doing your global studies review. So let's take a peek. We already went through questions 1 through 10, so we're going to start at question 11. So question 11, what is cultural diffusion? If this isn't something that you've heard of yet, that's a problem, because you should have heard this term several times, and not only this year, but in your past years. Okay, so cultural diffusion is something that has happened throughout time, something that still occurs today. So that's just that sharing of ideas, beliefs, and traditions between different regions of the world. Okay, so one big example of this is sushi. Sushi is a traditional dish of Japan, but we enjoy sushi in the United States. It is also enjoyed in Great Britain. It's also enjoyed in Canada, many different parts of the world, okay? So this is an idea that started in one culture, but spread or diffused into many different cultures of the world. Okay, another example that you will see show up frequently is McDonald's. Okay, McDonald's might be an American franchise, but you see it everywhere. Let's look at number 12. What is the Hellenistic culture? And if you forgot about the Hellenistic culture, I will forgive you this time, because it is something that kind of just got brushed over a little bit in your lessons. So the Hellenistic culture, that is the period of time in which Alexander the Great was the leader of the Greek kingdom of Macedonia. All right. During this time, the culture was classical Greek culture with Egyptian, Persian, and Indian influence. So people at this time were focused on the individual and his pursuit of pleasure or success. They weren't as much concerned with the ruling group. They weren't as much concerned with their religion. They were really concerned with their own lives and what their success was going to be, and what they had to do in order to achieve that success. Okay, so you saw a lot of this classical Greek culture mixed with different influences showing up in art and sculpture in buildings and architecture. All right, number 13, what is manorialism? All right, so when we look at manorialism, we're talking about the manner. This is very similar and kind of overlaps with the idea of feudalism. And I actually took some time yesterday because I was thinking to myself, well, really, what is the difference between feudalism and manorialism? And it made a little more sense to me when I saw an explanation that feudalism is a relationship between the king and the noble, but manorialism is the relationship between the noble and the peasants. So in manorialism, it's a system in which the peasants relied on their land, which was owned by a king or a noble. It was this idea that they were going to work the land, but they didn't own the land, and that a lot of their spoils or a lot of what they earned went right back to the noble or the king that owned the land. Okay, so I actually included this image because it talks about it being a feudal manor. So you'll see that there's that huge overlap between feudalism and manorialism. And so 14 connects to that one. It says, where would you find manorialism? And that's going to be medieval Europe. And just to understand what it means when we say medieval, that's the 5th to 15th century. So this kind of this pyramid of power over here showed a pretty good explanation of what the power looked like. Okay, so you had the religious figure. Under that, you had a monarch. They would lease out land to nobility, who would then give land to vassals or knights, and they would provide land and protection for peasants and serfs. But as you can see, those peasants and serfs then had to provide food and services for the knights and the vassals. And the knights had to provide loyalty and protection and military service to the nobles, and the nobility had to provide money and taxes and knights to the monarch. So everyone got something out of this deal. So number 15, who was the leader of the Byzantine Empire? This is going to be our buddy Constantine, this looker right here. All right, his name should seem familiar because we know that Constantinople was a huge hub for trading and culture during the Byzantine period. Okay, this is modern-day Istanbul. So Constantinople was named after Constantine. Good way to remember this is Constantine, Byzantine. Number 16, what was the Pax Mongolica? This is a time of peace in a large part of Europe and Asia, and it was actually brought on by the Mongol Empire taking over. This period of time led to the establishment of the Silk Roads. So typically, you wouldn't think of, these dudes coming into your town and creating peace and prosperity for your society. But that's actually what happened. They provided some stability to some of these lands that might have been a little bit weaker or not had solid government control. So the Mongol Empire is important to talk about because look at how huge it was. All right, took up, this is modern day China, and then, modern day India, Middle East, and Russia, parts of Europe. So definitely important to talk about. Number 17, why is Korea considered a cultural bridge? So, ideas frequently spread between China, Korea, and Japan. And an explanation for this is just look at the geography. Okay? So Korea is kind of in between Japan and China. So ideas would come from China and then go to Korea, and then these cultural ideas would then spread from Korea over to Japan. Number 18 is one that you guys should know. How did the bubonic plague spread? So plague-infested rats came to Europe on trading ships from Asia. Fleas landed on these rats and picked up the plague, then spread it to the humans that they bit. So we learned in Living Environment that this was a bacteria that spread from rats to fleas to humans. So it's important that we know that this originated in Asia, but really wiped out a ton of people in Europe. So if you look in this image, you have rats coming in to an area through grain. So they're eating the grain, and if they're shipping the grain, maybe from Asia, rice, right? If the rats are feeding on that, they're going to get stuck in those ships as it gets transported over to Europe. Number 19, where was the Ottoman Empire located? So at the height of its power, the Ottoman Empire included Asia Minor, the Middle East, part of North Africa, and southeastern Europe. So it's easier to look at a map of this. Okay, so we've got Asia Minor, the Middle East, part of North Africa, and southeastern Europe. Number 20, why did European countries need to find a new trade route to Asia? So from looking at those maps that we had peeked at before, you could see that many European countries are trying to build empires. This meant that they were constantly fighting with each other. They're constantly at war with each other. They're trying to, take each other down and take each other's land. So if you're not getting along with your neighbor's probably not going to let you cut through their backyard to take a shortcut to school. So if there's an area of Europe that is neighboring a rival empire, they're not exactly going to let you cut through to get over to Asia. So this meant that they had to find a sea route to Asia. And for the most part, this involved going around Africa. All right, last one we're going to look at today. Why did the Renaissance begin in Italy? And what I really should have done is I should have put big dollar signs on this slide, because Italy had gained a lot of wealth through trade and banking, and wealthy businessmen became what's called patrons, and they invested in art. So this image that I put on here is the Medici family. They are very well-known patrons, and essentially what they would do is they would pay for the living expenses and supply expenses for artists in order to reap the benefits of their art. So during the Renaissance, people really wanted to see new art and ideas, and so this was the way that it got paid for. So big reason that the Renaissance began in Italy is because that's where the money was. Alright, so we are done with this today. Tomorrow, we're going to be looking at the rest of the questions in this packet. So if you feel like you might lose it, please put the packet in your folder by the printer, and we will take another peek at it tomorrow. Have a good day, guys.